Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Great hello to everybody from Berlin. It is a great pleasure on behalf of the Roundtable to welcome you to today's webinar titled Encounters at Eye Level, Tackling Racism in the Tourism Value Chain. My name is Katharina Stechl. I am the program manager of the Roundtable Human Rights and Tourism, and I will guide you through today's webinar together with my colleague Yara Schreiber, who is responsible for a smooth technical process in the background. We are a women's only speaker group today, which was not intentional, but nevertheless, I'm very proud to have very active and empowered women today with us who will share their knowledge with us. For those of you who do not yet know the Roundtable, I would like to shortly introduce ourselves. The Roundtable is a multi-stakeholder initiative that works on the implementation of human rights due diligence in the tourism industry. The Roundtable currently has 32 members from 6 countries, with suppliers, with multipliers, tour operators, certification bodies, non-governmental organizations, and travel associations. And we see ourselves as an open platform for the exchange of knowledge and mutual learning within the industry. And yeah, we try to be a trustworthy network for the tourism industry and work in a demand-oriented way in order to make the resumption of travel positive and sustainable for all stakeholders through a human rights-based approach. I shortly want to touch the housekeeping rules of today's webinar. All of you are muted by default. If you want to talk to either me, my colleague Yara, or the speakers, please use the chat and also ask your questions there. We will have only little time after each presentation to answer questions, but we'll try our best to answer them all. The webinar will be recorded and soon available on the Roundtable website. And please note that everything will be recorded. In this webinar, we will discuss structural problems on racism in the tourism industry today. The presentation will focus on the bridge of structural racism and tourism today. And yeah, where are the roots of racism in tourism? How do people of color experience discrimination in the tourism value chain, and what can we do about it? Therefore, we have 3 slots of presentations, which you can also see here. So we have a part of like knowing the history, create awareness, and take action. With these brief remarks, I would like to move on to our first speaker. Her name is Pia Florence. She is a freelancing journalist, and she worked for many major German broadcast channels. And in 2019, she produced a program about colonial legacies and current travel documentaries, a topic that she already dealt with in her PhD thesis. She will give us a short historical outline, creating links between travel and neo-colonial structures and giving impulses for improvement. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And Pia, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. And first off, just 2 remarks. I'm sorry, there seems to be some sort of construction work outside my flat. So if you hear a slight noise in the background, please excuse that. And Katharina, would you be able to do the presentation for me, my PowerPoint presentation, because there seems to be some slight problem
Sure.
with. Thanks a lot. This has some time though, because first of all, I would like to invite you to imagine a slightly different version of history as we know it. And I would like to invite you to imagine what the world would look like if Europe hadn't dominated the 15th and 16th century. No Vasco da Gama, no Christopher Columbus, no Amerigo Vespucci, but instead, let's say, Chinese merchants and Navy sailors were the ones to discover the world and were the ones to discover Europe, for example. And let's say one of the most prominent among them is Admiral Chen He. And he started from, let's say, Nanjing and traveled west through the Indian Ocean and through the Persian Gulf, through the Mediterranean, and finally reaching the North Sea. And along his travels, he named and described the areas he visited: India, Iran, East African countries such as Ethiopia, and finally Western Europe. And obviously in the 15th and 16th century, people didn't have complete geographical knowledge. And so maybe Tsinghe thought that Europe and East Africa were somehow connected, the land masses were connected, and that's why he thought Western Europeans would still be part of this group of people he described as Ethiopians, let's say. So what would our lives now be like if we had lived in this empire of Tsengistan? What would our lives be like as Ethiopians? Our economy would still be largely based on agriculture and would largely be controlled by international companies, and we would still be working a lot in manufacturing jobs. And our languages, French, Spanish, German, and obviously English, would be interesting for scientists from Tsengistan who could study and classify them. But without any knowledge of Mandarin or any other Chinese language, we would hardly be able to visit universities or work in other sectors, in other job sectors. And if we had gained independence, as many other colonies did in the 1960s and 1970s, we would still be in the sphere of political influence of our former colonizers, who would advise and sometimes even force us to act in a certain way. And coming to travel and tourism, people would very much like to visit us and be curious to get to know our cultures and the way we dress, what we eat, what our traditions are like, such as Carnival and Christmas coming up. And maybe they thought we had kept closer to our original way of life. And having barely left school, people from Tsengistan would come and as volunteers to help us take care of our children or save our environment. And this thought experiment, it was created by the political scientist Aram Ziai, who is now professor at Kassel, at the University of Kassel. And it simply reverses the roles we Europeans have played in the past 500 years. And it does sound strange to many of us, me included, because we are not used to think about how fragile and yet how pervasive our idea of the world is. So if you look at the first slide, you can see two different maps. The one in the upper left-hand corner is the traditional projection. It's the Mercator map, which projects the globe onto a flat 2D surface. And you can see the relations, the size relations between the different continents and countries. And the right bottom one is a different kind of projection, but it is much more accurate in size and surface area than the Mercator projection. And there you can see that Europe is actually quite small, even tiny, in comparison with the areas European countries had colonized by the turn of the century. And it's always helpful to keep in mind that at one point, 85% of the Earth were controlled by one European nation or another. And if you want, this is colonialism in a nutshell, the way we think and see and perceive the world in terms of political, cultural and economic domination. And this continues to shape the way we view us, ourselves and others in the world. Just to give you one tiny example, the first European trading posts in India were established by the Portuguese in 1498, and the British finally left India when the country became independent in 1947. So that means there were almost 450 years of European presence and ultimately British domination in India. This is the case for quite a number of countries. And between the end of the Second World War in 1945 and 1975, 64 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America gained their independence under sometimes very different circumstances. There might have been long and mostly peaceful campaigns, such as in India. There might have been bloody and arduous wars like in Vietnam or Algeria, or one or another combination of those two. So it is hardly surprising, given the time span and given the impact European presence has had in these countries, that colonial history has repercussions on the colonized countries, but also on us as colonizers ourselves. And it's important to understand that colonial empires were not simply a political or governmental system, not simply an administrative system, but an expression of cultural and political thought. And this, I think, is quite, well, if you want, nicely put in a poem by the British poet Rudyard Kipling, which is on the next slide, which is called The White Man's Burden. It's from the turn of the century. And it's an expression of the sentiment, of this kind of sentiment, colonial sentiment during the turn of the century. Take up the white man's burden, it reads. This is the first stanza, the very beginning of the poem. Send forth the best you breed, go bind your sons to exile and to serve the captive's need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Sorry, your new called some peoples, half devil and half child. And I think this is in a number of ways, this is quite indicative of what colonialism has been like for many Europeans. It consists of an imperialist ideology that imagines European colonized taking up the tasks of mapping and civilizing the world, of exploring and understanding cultures, of bringing light and education and progress to the global South at a great cost to themselves, a burden. That's why Rudyard Kipling calls it a burden. And it's a complex ideology. It's by no means simple to say, we Europeans going to another country to exploit resources, let's say, because this ideology contains ideas about white supremacy, about how the economy should be structured, how economic theories might work, and about ideas of history and progress that are very central to our self-understanding. And I know that for Germans, and I would also assume for Swiss and Austrians, these legacies rarely turn up in public debates and therefore sometimes quite strange. And that is partly because Germany lost its colonies during the First World War, much earlier than, for example, France or Britain. And that's why it's sometimes difficult to understand how present this idea on sentiment of empire still is in Britain, for example, where it is a much more natural part of the conversation, if you will, and where the Commonwealth plays a significant role, particularly after Brexit. There's a postcard I would like to share with you on the next slide that was produced between 1902 and 1910, sometime in between those two dates. And the original photograph is taken from 1875. It shows an Indian woman from Kashmir in front of the British colonial flag for India. And I think it illustrates this sentimental value that is still connected to empire in Britain. This is just one small example that I think illustrates that very well. After Brexit, a plan emerged from British government and civil servant circles for trade partnerships with former colonies, which is obviously, if you want to leave the European Union, we'll need to look in other places in the world for trade partnerships. That's a very obvious thing to do. The much less obvious thing, I think, was that it was called Empire 2.0, this plan for economic partnerships. And a number of commentators in Britain argued that this was one, very offensive, but also very simple look at colonial history. And I think in this way, it is similar to the postcard I'm showing you, because it does by no means take into account the views of the former colonies. It presents empire as something that has brought progress and economic welfare to the colonized nations. And coming back to Germany for a short while, this would seem odd. Why would someone evoke the former colonies for trade partnership? This is something that is not present in German public debate. But I think that this doesn't by no means show that we in this country have actually come to terms with our colonial past. And I think it's quite the opposite. German colonial history is not taught in schools, hardly taught in schools, I have to say, neither in universities, and there's very little public understanding about this legacy. If we think of Namibia, which was once called Deutsch Südwest, there has been a years-long debate over the genocide that the German colonial administration inflicted on the Ovaherero and Nama people. And what the German government did was pay development aid instead of reparations. Reparations is something that is very much reserved to European Western nations. And development aid is to pay development aid is a way to circumvent acknowledgement of this genocide. And the same kind of discussion evolves around stolen colonial artifacts in German museums, for example. And I know these things may sound very abstract at some points or unrelated to the tourism value chain, but I think the way we conceive of other parts of the world is directly related to our expectations when we travel, and thus to the industry in general. We think about what is worth visiting, which monument is representative of, let's say, India, or what is the true essence of a country like Kenya? What do we present in our offers? What do we present in our promotion? And advertisement and promotion for travel companies builds on this desire for authenticity and exploration, obviously. And this also means at some point stepping into the shoes of colonial travelers and explorers. This, let's say, position often leads to exoticist and essentialist conceptions of the global South. And another major link, I think, between colonial legacies and travel is how much are we expecting access to what a colleague of mine has once called the backstage areas of life, and how much are we granted this access to other people's daily lives? What are we expecting, for example, when we want to see ceremonies or people's living areas or religious shrines or feasts, for example? And why do these peeks behind the curtain have such an appeal for European travelers? This idea of living like the locals that comes up in a number of travel documentaries, for example, that seems to be very important here. And the proximity and expectations of local life. And what we rarely ask ourselves, I think, what travelers and tourists rarely ask themselves, I think, is what do local people actually want to show? How much are they willing to share of their lives and of their cities and places? And I know this is a very gray area. There's no black and white here. I will give you two short examples. One is from my very own Lonely Planet for India. And there's a tour operator in Delhi. And the article in the Lonely Planet reads the following: Hope Project, 90-minute walks around the Basti, the slum of Nizamuddin, which surrounds the Dargah, learning about the area. It's a poverty-stricken place, so it can be a shocking as well as insightful visit. The walk fee goes towards supporting the Hope Project's work. Wear modest clothing, as this is a very traditional area. How much do we consider what people want to show about their living areas? How much do we consider how we intrude into their lives, into their daily lives, even if it is for a good case, for a welfare project like this one? And the other example I was going to show you is a 2018 travel documentary from Germany, which does not work, unfortunately, due to technical programs. We tried that this morning. But I will show you a still from Leaving the Frame. This is what the documentary is called. Exactly, this is it. And you can see Maria Erich and Manuel Wehring. These are two German documentary makers who decide on their world trip. They decide to visit Kenya as their first stop. And the village you see in this picture in Kenya is one where women suffering from domestic abuse built a new life for themselves, built this village and a new life. And the income for these women is mostly generated by welcoming tourists and showing and selling crafts and telling their stories about violence and domestic abuse. And these two filmmakers are, when they visit the village, are taken aback by the fact that these women ask for money for being filmed, for being interviewed, for visiting this village. And Maria Erich says in an interview later for the German magazine Der Spiegel, "We would have liked a better mix, taking part in people's everyday life. Unfortunately, that was rarely possible." Maria Erich regrets, access to white Kenyans was easy, but contact with black Kenyans was much more difficult. And I think these scenes from the documentary, the tour operators offer in The Lonely Planet, they raise the question, or they raise questions about participation and control. The women, on the one hand, clearly made a business out of their village, but they are at the same time also dependent on the very particular appeal of their partly horrific stories, and how much tourists are interested in their private lives. And in parts, they sell their private lives. And we need to ask ourselves, I think, how much can local businesses actually control the terms of partnership? And how are they consulted in terms of what they offer and what they are supposed to offer, and how much people might be interested in their lives? And I think in general, we need to ask ourselves, how much does tourism perpetuate this colonial imagery that still exists in our minds, that we come and explore and learn about cultures and have access to cultures? And the more important question maybe for this meeting today is, who profits from promoting this imagery? How much do people actually participate in the profits that are garnered here? And what I would like to do is to invite you to take a different kind of look, or reversing roles, like we did in the at the beginning of my presentation with this thought experiment about Tseng He. On the last picture I want to show you, you can see it's a parade in Congo. In the car on the right-hand side, you see the Belgian King Baudouin, who is just handed over Congo to a Congan government. It's the Day of Independence. And it's a picture photograph by the German photographer Robert Lebeck from 1960. And we're actually looking in the face of a man who has just stolen this ceremonial sable, I think it is called in English, I'm not quite sure, to be honest, from King Baudouin's belt. And I think this is a very symbolic picture in terms of who are we actually looking at, and who do we want to put in the focus of our view, if you want. This is if you want, a post-colonial perspective that invites us to challenge our ideas of the world and our central, what we think of our central role in this world. And the Indian historian Dipesh Chakraborty has called this provincializing our roles, making us a part of the wider world and not the center of the world in our thought. This also means, I think, supporting local experts and resources, and getting to know your local partners and listen to their suggestion and to their boundaries when it comes to what they're willing to show, and also to be aware of the highly unequal opportunities to travel and work for people from the global south in European countries. And this is the picture I actually want to leave you with, because I think it's nice and it's cheeky and it's also highly symbolic, and I think we can take a lot from just looking at this scene. So thanks a lot for having me, and thanks a lot for your interest.
Thank you so much, Pia, for this very, very interesting change of perspective. And I really think that gives some food for thoughts. As we already a little bit behind schedule.
Very sorry.
No problem. But we also do not have any questions at the moment, so I would directly continue with our next speaker. I'm very, very proud to have Martinique Louise with us today. She is an award-winning diversity in travel consultant, the creative lead for Nomad Travel Tribe, the president of the Black Travel Alliance, and also the creator of the ABC Travel Green Book. She is working directly with the tourism boards and travel brands, and her mission is to change the face of tourism to make everybody feel represented and reflected. And without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Martinique. Thanks for being here, and I'm very much looking forward to your input.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My Wi-Fi is a little shaky, so I do apologize if at sometimes I cut out, but I will make sure that if you'd like to see this presentation, that you can get it in your inbox. I am currently on holiday, and so that's why I'm not at home with my at-home Wi-Fi. Nonetheless, as she said, I am Martinique Louise, and I'm really actually excited to share with you some things that maybe you've never heard before, some things that might make you very uncomfortable, as well as, okay, I just want to make sure you guys can still hear me. Some things that might make you uncomfortable, but some things that are very, very real from a different perspective. As you can see, I am a Black woman, and that means that what I've experienced in my lifetime traveling is very, very different from what somebody who looks different from me has. So I'm here to give you my perspective and to answer any questions that you might have. As she said, I'm a diversity and travel consultant, and that means that I'm hired by tourism boards and travel brands to come in and not only teach them how to connect with inclusive communities online, but additionally help them give a different perspective like I'm giving to all of you today, as well as make sure that their hiring practices are mindful and very, very effective so that their teams internally look very different, so that they make sure that they're appealing to everybody in the travel sector. I'm the creative lead of Nomadness Travel Tribe, which is one of the first Black travel movements to start in America, but we cater to specifically travelers of color. We help inspire and encourage and educate them as to where they can go on their holidays, not only to be safe, but where people are welcoming Black and brown travelers. I am the president of Black Travel Alliance, a newly found alliance that started this June after Blackout Tuesday, when all the travel brands and tourism boards posted that Black square to stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. But we were formed to really hold that industry accountable because they were not who they were saying they were. These are the same people who did not hire us as Black travel professionals. These are the same people who never showed Black people in any type of media or travel advertisements or promotions to say, yes, we want people who look like you to come. And so we created the alliance to hold the industry accountable and also make sure that we're giving travel industry professionals who are of African descent the best possible resources that they can have to advance in the tourism space. And then I'm the creator of the ABC Travel Green Book, the #1 resource connecting the world and tourists everywhere to the African diaspora globally. One thing that I am known for is the diversity and travel report card, which I come out in with every single year. Now, it doesn't necessarily apply to only Black or brown. It applies to just diversity and inclusion in the travel industry. And today we are focusing on racism between people of color, but I wanted to let you guys know that it all stems from this. If I call myself a diversity and travel consultant, then I have to talk about the overall pictures, especially when it comes to what you say and how you name people, or how you effectively call somebody something. So me as an African American, I could be called an African American, or I can be called a Black American, but the best thing to do is to ask me what I want to be called. The same thing for somebody who is disabled. They might not want to be called disabled. They might want to be called differently abled, or they might just only want to be called able. They might not want you to point out the fact that, yes, there is a disability that they might have. So it just comes up to you asking people. Specifically in America, it's always a hard time that we have when it comes to Native Americans or Indigenous American or First Nation Americans, because some of them like to be called different things. Again, it's up to you to ask them, what exactly would you like to be called? But I want you to understand that not only are we hit with race, we're hit with race and then what comes after that. So I'm a Black female, or this lady right here is a Black female who's over the age of 70, but ask yourself, does your brand appeal to her? Or this lady right here is a Black female who is Muslim. She's going to experience different things than I experience because she is Black and her religion is something that's completely different. So now you're going into things that are halal travel. Or this young man right here, he is a Black male, but he's also considered a plus size traveler. Now, he doesn't care if you call him chubby, he doesn't care if you call him fat, but somebody else who might identify as plus size travel would rather you only say plus size travel. So again, make sure you ask people what they want to be called. There's nothing that's necessarily politically correct and not, because it's based off of each of the individuals. Now, since December, we saw this whole word BIPOC come out, and all of a sudden everybody's using this term. Personally, it's something that I hate. I do not like the term. I don't know where it came from. It came out of nowhere, but if people say it, I understand what it means. In the UK, they also use the phrase BAME, right? Which stands for Black, Asian, Multicultural, and Ethnic. So you can use that as well. This young lady right here, she's very, very known in the travel industry, but she is Asian, but she likes for people to say Pacific Asian Islander instead of just saying Asian and assuming that all Asians can be grouped under one umbrella, because they cannot. So these are different things that you just have to ask different people what their preference is. Now, I created the ABC Travel Green Book, and this does actually coincide directly with what we're talking about, which is colonialism. And the reason why it does is because people don't understand that Black people are everywhere. And they don't understand that because they don't realize that not only do people colonize different places in Africa and then take them as slaves and take them other places, but that is one of the main reasons that you have Black people throughout everything. And one of the things I do in this book is help you to be able to identify where exactly those Black people are around the world. And a lot of times what I tell people is this is the history that was left out of the history books. These were the things that are left untold. And this is an issue that the tourism industry has. And also another thing that I do in the book, because as a Black traveler, one of the main things I want to know as I travel is where can I go and actually be safe? There's a lot of discrimination and racism that happens towards me every time I travel to a place. I was just saying today that I was worried about a news story because it was showing how some children get to Italy and then they're placed with different families. And it was showing a Black girl and she was going to get placed in Northern Italy. And I was saying, oh, I kind of have a problem with that, because when I was in Northern Italy, I had an amazing time, but there was two different things that happened to me. The first is I was walking down the street and a man just started cussing at me. I had no idea what he was saying, but I didn't understand how I offended him when I was simply walking to dinner. But he had an issue with a Black person being in his town. And then the other thing that happened to me is I got filmed by a man and I didn't even know he was filming me, where some females who were from there ended up, I guess, speaking to him and basically almost fighting him because of what he was doing. So he saw me as a sexual figure. And I understand that sometimes when people see Black women in different places, they might think that they're prostitutes. But again, that is a stereotype. Some of it has some truth to it, but you can't assume that that is how everybody is. And you can't treat everybody like that, because it does make for a negative impact to happen on what my experience was in that place. And so when you go through this book of mine, when you get to certain places, I do tell you the experiences that I had as a Black woman traveling solo or traveling in a group, and what you could experience as a Black person traveling to that place. So say, yes, when I was in Iceland, I was walking down the street and somebody called me a monkey, and I didn't even realize that they were talking to them, but that is something that is very common that happens amongst Black people. People always want to touch your hair, not understanding that this is my personal space. I don't go up to you and just rub your bald head. I don't go up to you and touch any part of your body, but this is what happens oftentimes to Black women as we are sexualized when we go from place to place. And it is an intense issue that a lot of people don't understand that we actually deal with, but we do. Another thing that happens oftentimes, and one of the reasons that I chose this young man to be on the cover of my book, is because as a Black man, he is often feared when he goes out. People see him as dangerous people will see him as, oh, he's going to do something with them. When he walks past them, and they might clench their purse. And he is one of the most gentle people that you will ever meet in your whole entire life. So it is also about smashing negative stereotypes within the tourism chain, because for whatever reason, there's these negative connotations on how Black people or how people of color are. One of the things that I want to point out with this visual is that this shows directly the effects of what happens when you colonize a place. So a lot of people don't know that the Dutch went into Suriname, Aruba, and Guyana and brought slaves over there after they colonized their countries. And one of the things that the tourism board in Amsterdam would not tell you up until about 5 years ago is that there's a Black history tour, because people would also tell you there was no Black history in Amsterdam, but that is untrue. And there's a lady named Jennifer Tosh who runs Black heritage tours out of Amsterdam that teaches you all of the Black history that you can find. This is an actual full post that shows you all of the different things that you can find, all the Black-owned businesses that you can find. And this is also something that you would also find in my book. But the reason of me showing this was to let you know that Black history is world history and Black history is everywhere. And if you are in tourism, this is part of the things that you should be showing. Because when I come to a location, I'm seeking out the people who look like me. I'm also wanting to know about the different native culture, but I want to know how my people got there, what impact they had on the community and the country, and how they are now advancing in those spaces. So one of the things that I always like to point out, especially when it comes to Native American or First Nations or Indigenous people, is that when they're seen in the media, oftentimes in tourism, you're always showing them dancing or drumming or drunk. They never show that this is an actual community that has an actual story, that has built this land. And this is throughout Canada and the United States. So it's something that I always tell the tourism boards who are around that part, or even brands who are around those places where there are large populations of Native Americans. I ask them, what do you hire them for? Do you show them any other time than when you want to impress people who are coming to your destination? And do you ask them to do more than drum and dance? Do you show them in a positive light? Do you encourage people to go to the reservations, which a lot of times they don't do? And additionally, what a lot of people don't realize is that October in the UK is Black History Month. That means that also in the Netherlands and as well as Ireland, that this is the times that you learn Black history. But these are things that you won't see on BBC. These are things that don't get to make it on the news, where you're not learning about the people who have come over there and who have really helped build the nations. And so these are just examples of how the tourism industry and the whole tourism chain can do better as a whole in terms of showing and breaking negative stereotypes, but showing different type of communities and the impact that they had in your places. Additionally, one thing that I always say is that we have research for a reason. And people say, well, how can we do better as a tourism industry? You can buy the reports that have been put out that tell you the exact numbers that people are spending and how much people are doing different things. So for instance, in late November, the Black Travel Alliance put out a research study that showed that African-American travelers alone spend $109.4 billion on travel annually. That is an astronomical number. So if that is the case, why aren't we reflecting any travel advertisements and promotions? If that is the case, why don't you see Black people internally and travel brands and travel companies? Because they would understand how to speak to that demographic. Additionally, Muslim travelers, they spend the most out of everybody. You don't see anything about halal travel. You can go to restaurants and you might see a V for vegan, but you don't see an H for halal travel, right? You don't see a mocktail menu, right? When you go to places, even though they can't drink, but they're spending the most money when they go out. So it's just very interesting, which people don't think. And then this figure, 1.6 billion, this is the amount of revenue a brand would generate if they capture 10% of the Hispanic adventure travel market, letting you know that Hispanic people are outdoors too. They climb too, they cycle, they ski too. And this is how much you can actually capture in revenue if you just show them, if you just appeal to them. So I always say numbers don't lie. And it's one of the biggest things and biggest ways that you can advance in the industry to do better and help stop the structural racism. Additionally, I say one way you could do it is smash in the water, right? People think that maybe Muslim people might not swim, that maybe, you know, they might not do deep diving, but if they didn't, they would never came out with a burkini. Think about how many times you see Black people or Mexican people like Dominique Miller out of Hawaii doing any type of water sports, because there's a negative stereotype around that Black people don't swim, that Black people don't do anything that has to do with the water. This is untrue. Or again, show a Black man being non-threatening, right? That's one way you can help smash a negative stereotype. Show him being not non-threatening and really connecting with a community when he goes abroad, just like my friend Junior here in the rice fields with this man who actually tried to kiss him. It was actually quite funny. So one of the things that I always say is hold yourselves accountable, right? Especially after Blackout Tuesday, when everybody posted that Black square and said, we stand in solidarity with the Black travel movement. Well, how do you hold yourself accountable, or even people you know? Ask yourself, did they remove their Blackout Tuesday post, right? Is their feed still celebrating Black content creators like it did for the whole month of June, right? All of a sudden, Black faces were popping up everywhere. And it was very inauthentic. It was very annoying to us because never did you show us before, but now you want to show us all the time. And then it's like 30 full posts just of Black people. Have they posted any anti-racism allyship resources for their community? What are you helping the people around you do? Are you sharing those books? Are you sharing those blog posts? Have you hired any people of color internally? Does your internal staff look one way? If it does, that is incorrect. If it does, you will not be able to move forward until there's somebody in a wheelchair, until there's somebody in a hijab, until there's somebody who's plus size, until there's a Black person, until there's a brown person. You will not be able to effectively do your jobs and make sure you're appealing to everybody until your internal makeup looks diverse. Have they invested money into diversity training? I tell people all the time, I'm not just telling you to hire me for the sake of it because I have to pay bills. I'm telling you to hire me so that you can go in and change your marketing strategy so you never have to be held accountable again, so that you really understand that diversity and inclusion should be top of mind every time you're moving forward. And have you become a part of communities, I say, like Sway Brand, who is a brand that helps connect you just with different people from different backgrounds. Additionally, what do we want to see as travelers of color? We want to see purpose-driven travel, heartfelt experiences. We want you to see smashing negative stereotypes, and we want you to lead by example. We notice every single move you make because we are watching. So if you're leading by example, more than likely we will spend money with you. More than likely we will come to your destination. More than likely I will put you in something like this when I show it to a community like this one and say, this is a brand who's doing an excellent job, or included in the diversity and travel report card. And then also, I just want to say that one thing that I came out with, which will really help the way that we just deal with brands, is gifts on Instagram stories. I just released these last week, and this is so that travelers now can take hold of how we travel. And if you are a Latino traveler and you are in a place like I'm a place right now, and they welcome you with open arms, and you're showing that place on your social media, you can now put a gift that says Latino traveler trusted, so all the other Latino travelers who follow you know they welcome people that look like us. And why did I do this? Because this helps travelers take the narrative back and let people know either you're being diverse and inclusive or you're not, and we notice it, and we're going to tell our family and friends about it, because we will reward the ones who are doing a good job, but to the ones that are not, we will call you out. And sorry that I'm speeding through, but I'm on a time limit. I just want to show you some groups or some communities that you can follow online so you can understand more about the things that they may go through, or so that you can understand how to connect with these type of people, or if you want to hire them for diversity, equity, and inclusion training, you can do so. And that is it. This is how you can find me. And again, sorry for speeding up towards the end there.
Martinique, I sincerely want to thank you not only for speaking up and using your voice, but also sharing your firsthand insights with us. And they left me a little bit speechless, I have to say, from time to time, because these were really shocking reports. And I'm very grateful that you also shared some inspiration for taking action. We have a question in the chat that is like, how can travel consultants like you help to make sure that there is a real change in thinking about diversity and not only using the image of diversity? And I think you already touched that quite well, But what is, in your opinion, the most important first steps to take?
Yeah, I think it is admitting that that you have a problem, or admitting that you haven't done this in the past, and then really figuring out what your brand or your team can do to move forward to make sure they are inclusive. And like I said, this is about Black or brown people, period. But diversity and inclusion is so much, you know, and it's really just about having it top of mind all the time. But there are people like me in the world who will hold you accountable, and you might think you can run and hide, but I will find you and I will hold you accountable. And that's what I've been able to do. People did just use diversity and inclusion as buzzwords, but I always say use it as calls to action. Make sure that it is what you do to make sure you put one foot in front of the other to be inclusive of everybody.
Thank you very much for that answer. I would like to switch to our last speaker for today for the moment. Her name is Yvonne Küpper. She works for Fairway Travel and is responsible there for all marketing activities. Fairway is a responsible tour operator which offers tailor-made trips and local excursions within communities. And Fairway has been a member of the Roundtable since a few years already. And I'm really grateful that you're here today, Yvonne, and share some insights of how to take first steps, especially as a small or medium-sized enterprise. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Katharina. I will share my presentation. Okay. First of all, I want to thank you, Martinique and Pia, for your really helpful and insightful presentations. I took quite a lot of it with me and also will implement it in the next steps, what we are doing. So my name is Yvonne, as Katharina just said, and I'm working at Fairway Travel. I will present you today more practical information, what we did so far to become more diverse as a small tour operator, and yeah, also what we will do next. So first of all, I will present you what Fairway does, because I think it's quite important also to understand how we included diversity in our program, and then I will give you some insights what we did so far. Fairway is a small tour operator and we focus on sustainable travel. We offer trips around the world in 34 countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. And we connect the travelers directly to the local travel experts. That means that the local travel experts who are living in the country itself, they are communicating directly with the travelers, and they are making a tailor-made plan according to their wishes, but also according to the expertise of the local travel experts. So they will tell which places are good to visit, which activities are really nice in the destination, and they will figure out what plan they can do. In the end, the travelers are booking through Fairway with the German law as a German tour operator. And then, of course, they go on the holiday. But what we would like to do and offer is more than just this holiday. We work together closely with local communities and support them. So as Pia just mentioned, we really talk with the people in the destinations itself, what they want to show. We work together with local guides, with like chefs, offer cooking classes, small scale accommodations, talk with the families, what they need, what they offer, and how we can also improve our product to make it better, and what they also can offer. About 85% of our revenue goes directly into the country, so to the local guides, of course to our local experts, but also to the accommodations, the owners of the accommodations. We are a team of in total 38 persons. 34 persons are our local partners. Some of them you can see on the right here. So we have only one partner per destination who is organizing the trip. Of course, there are a lot of people involved, like local guides or chefs, what I just told you. But in that way, we have a really strong relationship with our partners, and we really build on it. So we have once a year, like a meeting, a get together. I think this year it will be online, but there we held also trainings, communication trainings. And I already received that like a diversity training would be really interesting for next year. So what they do, they have the local insider knowledge because they live in the destination itself. And that's a really win-win situation, because we, as the team in Germany, as we are a German tour operator, we offer marketing activities and the administration task, and they can offer the local insider knowledge for the travelers. So who are we in Germany? Fairway is a German tour operator since 2016. And as Martinique just said, we had a look at our team, and to be honest, it's not very diverse, as you see. So how did we came to the topic of structural racism, diversity, and how did we approach it? I studied intercultural communication and also wrote my master thesis about diversity for social enterprises and their marketing activities. So I was a little bit aware of the topic, but to be honest, the Black Matter movement was the trigger this year to really deal with the topic. So we really started to educate ourselves first. So we read a lot of books, did some online tools of 20 days of activism, and also read articles related really to tourism and racism in tourism. Yeah, to really get some knowledge. I think it's only German, the last source, but I guess there are a lot of English sources as well. We also did an interview with Martina from the Black Travel Alliance, and that was really helpful too, because it gave us a lot of insights what we also could provide as next steps. After that, we talked in the team about the topic and how we can approach it, and how we can also change our products, our service, the presentation, the communication, and also, yeah, our own awareness, to be honest, because there was a lot which we needed to change and still need to change. So what we first did was to, or we're still doing it, to evaluate our products and presentation. So what kind of trips do we offer? Where do we offer it, and how do we present that? To be honest, this year it was quite good. Because of COVID, we didn't have that many bookings, to be honest. So there was a lot of time to evaluate these things. And we are relaunching our website next week. So we have to go through all the content anyway and had a look at all the products and how we present it. I will give you now a quite honest insight, what we found on our websites and how we are trying to do it better. So first we had a look at which language we are using, because words really have power. I'm now concentrating on the marketing activities because I'm the marketing manager. We also had a look at our products and how to work together with the local communities, but maybe that's a topic for another talk. So the problem is that a lot of persons in the tourism industry or tourism companies, and also we as Fairway, we use words which are quite exoticizing. I think I do it with these remarks, or services or persons like a proud Marseille, or using ascriptions like the Cubans simply have rhythm in their blood. And that's really problematic because, as Pia says, or also Martinique, it reproduces the colonialism stereotypes that that are made before in the history. So our solution is now to have an eye-to-eye communication to really tell the stories of the local community or the local persons like Nini with their cooking class, and really tell how they came to offer these products, how they do it, how they welcome the guests and what they are cooking. So it's really about the storytelling and focusing on the local people itself. The next critical thing is the images we use. Maybe you know the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And pictures are really telling a story. And pictures can reproduce stereotypes with a power gap. I think the pictures are really problematic here, especially the first picture, as there's quite a power gap with a white traveler showing some kids. Actually, it's in Tanzania, so I know it's some kids with an ocular, something above. I know it's a Daisy and Oliver, some blogger who traveled with us, but someone who doesn't know them, it reproduces a stereotype, which maybe you don't want to show. You know these bloggers, but the user, they have this picture in their mind, and you reproduce those stereotypes. So if you have not people of color but white people traveling, and they are staying, for example, in a small scale accommodation like the picture below, which is run by a family, this picture is quite nicer because it shows some harmony and togetherness. Of course, the next step would be to have people of color traveling for you and experiencing the itineraries and travel plans. But you really have to go through or what we did is to go through our pictures and have an external view above them and really criticize these pictures. The next step was to educate our customers or partners. As I said, we will have like the diversity training. We wrote an article for our travelers and users with the online resources I just told you, and also did a social media campaign, not the Blackout Tuesday, but with our knowledge, how we dealt with the topic, and asked questions, for example, on conferences, internal questions, or B2B partners, why there are no people of color in this conference or speaking up. But it's an ongoing process, to be honest. So we really have to do a lot still. And yeah, we really have to look at our hiring and acquisition process, really improve that, and also include diversity in our mission statement and code of conduct. So we already have an anti-discrimination part in our code of conduct, which every partner signs, but we think it's not enough, and we really should focus on more diversity within our partners, within ourselves, and always question us how we present things and what kind of trips do we offer. Okay, that's it. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for that insight. I know that this whole topic of diversity and inclusion seems to be very, very huge at the beginning, and it might be very tough to know where to start. And I think that you gave some pretty good insights on where to take action, especially as a small tour operator. We do not have any questions left, which is probably because, I mean, that was a lot of input, a lot of very, very exciting input. So, and time flew by so quickly. I sincerely want to thank our speakers, Pia, Martinique, and Yvonne, for their inspiring and very motivating input. And I would like to thank the participants for their time and interest in this significant topic. You all already have made the start by taking part in that subject, and now it's time to take into action what we actually learned and heard today. This webinar is actually the first of a series of webinars that will happen next year. And you can sign up for our newsletter in order not to miss any event. We will post the link in the chat now, and there you can register for the newsletter. We also have created a feedback poll, and I would be very, very grateful if you would take like 2 minutes time, it's anonymous, in order to give us your feedback to today's webinar. And I would also like to invite you to check out the Roundtable's website, to work with our tools and offers, for example, the Get Started tool that helps tourism companies to identify the human rights risk within their own company, and our resource center, where we have a lot of very interesting publication and links to download if you want to dig deeper into the whole topic of human rights and tourism. And on behalf of the Roundtable, I would like to say goodbye. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the speakers again for that inspiring input, and I hope to see all of you in February for our next webinar.